Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I had a good weekend. We celebrated Biddy's 4th birthday and it was a lot of fun, even though it was a really small party. We just had my parents over and opened some presents, had some cupcakes and ice cream. I mean, it was a good time, all things considered, just trying to, keep it small given the state we are in right now with this pandemic. Yay for the low-key pandemic party. Okay, we are going to talk about 4 different Too Faced palettes. I talked about getting these actually for my birthday. We have Kitty Likes to Scratch, Light My Fire, we have That's My Jam, and we also have Let's Play. And I really wanted to try these because I have had some really good luck with some of these smaller palettes that Too Faced has done, and I really like that format. They're these little 8-shade palettes, and I thought to look at them pretty much on the website. They seem like they were nicely balanced color-wise, like a good mix of matte and shimmer, light and dark. So I had some pretty high hopes for these. In the past, like the first one that they'd done that was this size was this one called Tickled Peach, and it was amazing. Absolutely loved this and really loved that I could use like this shade as a bronzer and this shade as powder, this shade as blush, this shade as highlight. It was just very versatile, and every single part of this felt buttery and rich and creamy, really nice to work with shadows. Same with the Salted Caramel more recently for this past holiday season. This one was really, really strong quality-wise. Both this one and the peach one have a nice scent to them, and they're just really strong palettes. When you're thinking about quality, when you're thinking about versatility, both of them just checked all the boxes. These, I hate to say, they are really weak palettes in my mind. I mean, there's one that I might pick over the others, but I'm really disappointed to see so much inconsistency with the shimmers in these palettes. That's the main weakness. And we're talking about 8-color palettes here. So if you've got 2 to 3 shades not pulling their weight out of an 8-color palette that's, already fairly small, I think that's a problem. And I also think it's a problem when we've got so many eyeshadow palettes to choose from out there. Plenty of neutral palettes, quite a few colorful palettes out there as well, where we could choose to spend our money. I mean, and drugstore is just, I think, surging with great quality. If you look at Catrice, if you look at e.l.f., we realize we can get great shadow color variety by looking to other brands. So you're not going to see a lot of raves in this video. I will explain each of the palettes and take you through them, and I'll show you looks that I've done with each of these. And you might even see the looks and say, well, oh, that's a pretty enough look. And I might agree as well. I might say, oh, I like the look that I have right now. But in terms of thinking, how good is this palette in comparison to the many other things we could buy, they're ranking a little lower for me. So first off, what I think I'll do is just kind of give you my mini review on each of these. Then I'll show you the tutorial that I shot on today's look, just so you could see one in action. I'll be posting swatches. I'll be posting pictures of past looks so you can see, how they actually come off. But first thing, let's talk about the That's My Jam palette. This was the one that I really had my eye on, thinking, ooh, that looks kind of unique. That looks like something I could really enjoy. The packaging on all of them, very cute. I do enjoy the kind of random concepts like this one, has a little record player, it's got the piece of bread and the jam and all that. It came in a cute little box. It's got like a gingham print all around the outside. And when you look at this color spread, I mean, this just really spoke to me. I loved those super cool, almost, bluish lilacs. I really loved seeing these 2 mattes right down here, which kind of make me think like peanut butter and jelly, Great peach up here in the corner. But the shimmers are such a letdown, and that's half of this palette, you guys. So I can't say like, oh my gosh, go get it, it's great, except for the shimmers, when that's 50% of what's going on your eyes. Like, could you turn out an all matte look with this? Yes, you could, but I want better for my money. So mattes, as you're gonna hear me probably say over and over again, I think there's some pretty good consistency with these. If you look at all of these shades, they are true to what you see in the pan. They're easy to blend. They go on the eye nicely without any special treatment. I really don't have any complaints about the mattes, but the shimmers end up being a situation where, here's this one right here, which is very, very shiny. And you might find you can build to a place with these, but most often it's going to be a situation where you need to use your finger to build them up because they're just too flaky to adhere to your brush and then get nicely patted down on the eyes. They just can't seem to survive that very well. This pinky shade here, I can get it off on my finger and you'll think, oh, that's a nice full-bodied magenta. And then you start like swatching it out, or you start patting it on the eyes, and it's just really, really sheer. And if you keep in mind like the creaminess dryness of the Tickled Peach palette from years past, if you think about what those shimmers felt like, and then you dip your finger into this guy right here, you can just feel the dryness and the sheerness that it really shouldn't be having, and the flakiness, okay? So it's not just the fact that, okay, maybe that shade is a little more sheer, it's a little more of a wash of color type of shade, it's giving a little bit of a texture variant to that palette. It's not just that. It can actually tank your look in the sense of creating so much fallout and just being so dry and not really hanging together as a shadow. And then we've got this shade right next to it with tons of potential to be a pretty, like, kind of duochrome-y shade, and that one does have a little more smoothness than the rest. But as I use these shades on the eyes, I just wasn't nearly as impressed with the overall look as I hoped I'd be. You can see one look that I did where I did use that kind of shimmery lilac shade and patted it on. I had to use my finger to do it and still ultimately felt like I should have had a little bit more punch with the look. And then another look that I did where I used kind of this pinky shimmer and worked that in on the lid, and just again left wanting more, left feeling like that should have been a more intense look for what I did, the work that I did to get there. And it's a shame because I love the color scheme and I really think that the mattes are brilliant in here. I just wish they would have stayed a little safer with their shimmer texture. I know they can do soft, creamy, buttery shimmers, and maybe let this one be that kind of oddball shifting shade, but give me smoothness and richness with the rest, please. Next up, we'll talk about Let's Play. So this makes me think of those like little Game Boys that people used to have, you know, very cute concept, and you look on the inside, and to me, you know, while this one I thought I would enjoy it because it had pink and berry and I do like those tones on the eye, it isn't quite as unique looking as That's My Jam. So I had that kind of in my head going in with this one. And I'd have to say it's just a pretty predictable palette. Much like the other one, the mattes are good. Okay, you could start your crease maybe with one of these shades, take it a little more pinky or a little more like warm, and then you have a nice berry rich shade here, a matte cream. It's a well-balanced palette in terms of what they chose to do with depth and texture. But then you start looking at some of the shimmers and we're getting like just far too much flakiness, like putting my finger in there, the dryness of feel, the need to again use a finger to actually get those laid down. With this one I feel like there's two better shimmers, and that would be this white and this one right down here. You know, just to touch them you get a little more smoothness of feel, but then completely flaky and sheer up top with these two. And again, it's a small palette. These things do matter and they're very noticeable, I think. Kitty Likes to Scratch. Okay, this one, if I had to pick one as a favorite, although I'm using that term loosely because I still think we can do better in terms of eyeshadow, but Kitty Likes to Scratch would probably be the one that's executing in the most satisfying way for me. And I think it's primarily because it can get the darkest. So it gives you, in a sense, the most range. So you could really take this to a deep smoky place. I used some of the black in my look today, and I actually kind of like how that's working into some of these other shades, and I didn't feel like I had to work that hard to get a nice blended look among my mattes. And again, like all of these palettes have gone along, you know, the mattes have been the strong suit. This shade I'm practically going to call a matte. It's got a little fine sparkle in it, but it behaves like a matte on the eyes. And we do have a couple of smooth, decent shimmers right up here with this peach and the kind of ruby red shade. Both of those are smooth. When you touch them, they feel like a shimmer should, but then your kind of accent, more bright shimmery shades right here, this one and this one, are very flaky and need some special treatment, and even when you give them that, they don't really adhere very well. You're not going to find amazing staying power with those shades that you have to end up tapping on with your finger to press them onto your lid and build them up. They can still end up doing some damage from a fallout sense, not only in application, but as your day rolls on. You might notice, oh, some sparkle has drifted down. They just need a little more like binding in that formula to make them more creamy. And I know Too Faced knows what they're doing because sometimes they do that. Most times in larger palettes they will. I'll show you a tutorial on this look with this palette in a minute, but yeah, I do appreciate the balance in this one. We go all the way from a light cream to a black and enough variation in between to kind of help things blend and look smooth and even. But I wish all the shimmers could have been this texture, you know? Finally, we're going to talk about Light My Fire. Again with the cute packaging. Oh, by the way, this one's supposed to smell like a tequila sunrise. The scent is barely there. It's barely there on all this stuff. These two, I really smell it on, the salted caramel and definitely the tickled peach. We know that Too Faced peach scent that's been infused in so many things, but the scent is barely identifiable in these palettes. That might be good news to some of you who are like, okay, keep the scent out of eyeshadow. But it was a claim on all this stuff. Like, this was supposed to be bubble gum. This was supposed to be berry jam. Kitty Likes to Scratch was a tequila sunrise. And this one is supposed to be like cinnamon hearts. And if I really smell deeply and really search for it and really put that picture of a cinnamon heart in my mind, maybe I'll smell it, but it's hard to pick up on. Here's what we have with this one. Mostly matte. Two disappointing shimmers. These are mattes that I feel like there are a lot of warm palettes out there. I'm thinking there's a warm palette from ColourPop that I know has like some yellows and warm shades in it. Do they still make that one that I'm thinking of? I know Viseart has done both small and larger palettes that have some real warmth like this going on. It can be attained in other ways. I didn't dislike my looks with this palette, and I was able to like tap on this shade, for example, and it gave me kind of a golden hue on the lids, and I thought it was pretty. That being said, again, I noticed this shade didn't stay very well throughout the day, while it seemed like my mattes actually did. I really think it would be a different story if the shimmers could have been like good quality shimmers, smooth and easy to apply. I'd probably be loving That's My Jam if those were good quality shimmers in there. This one, I feel like this color scheme has been pretty played out in a lot of different palettes, so even though most of the palette is matte and that results in most of the palette being pretty strong, I don't feel like I need to go to Too Faced for this particular product. So let's take a little review break and I'll show you the tutorial using this palette for my look today. So in this palette, we're going to start off in the crease with this shade right here, and it does have like a microfine golden shimmer in it, but that doesn't really translate to the eyes, and it's more like that teeny tiny shimmer is embedded in a matte shade, and the matte is really all that sticks and shows on the eye. So I'm popping that here in my crease. As you can see, there's a nice depth level to this shade. There's sort of a tone up from this right next door, and that could be a nice, like, more subtle crease shade if you wanted to start there. And so speaking of that shade, I'm going to go into that now. This little bit like really light tan brown color. And I'm just going to put that up over the border of this shade. Kind of like how that just smooths it out and fades it upward a little bit. And what I'm noticing with that matte, this is a pure matte shade that I'm putting on, it's very, very soft. I definitely like feel myself tapping off some excess, and it just reminds me of typical Too Faced mattes, so nothing wrong with that. Then if we want to kind of heat up the crease just a little bit more, I might go to this shimmery shade here. So like I said, it does have shimmer, but it's also got a little bit of depth with that tone. And it can kind of work nicely if you want to punch up the crease just a little bit more warmth-wise. I'm just kind of getting it in that outer part. When you're layering it up over these browns, it doesn't show up like glaringly red, but it does just give some heat to the eye. Now this is the palette that really goes the deepest and darkest. It has the most potential to do looks like that because you've got this black right here. You wouldn't have to pull that in all the time, or you could use it like liner, but in the spirit of really like making the most of this palette, I'm going to use it as shadow with a flat brush. Tap off the excess. You'll notice that shade does not have the softness that I feel in this like really light brown. But I'm just going to start patting that on the outer part of my eyelid with this flat brush. And it's really kind of a warm meets cool thing. I always think of black as being like the ultimate cool shade, and that's now coming in and being nice and dark and sort of cooling things down there on the outside. I'm thinking about using the tip of my brush so the darkest part of the color does get right there in the crease. Okay, see what we've done there? We've gotten basically half the lid covered in this black shade, and then we're also just kind of reaching for the crease with that color as well. And I think I'm going to take my little bit smaller crease type brush. This is the E27. It's just like a downsized E25, and it really targets the crease nicely. And I'm just going to go over that darkness. And as far as these matte shades go so far, you know, I'm pleased with what they're doing. I like the look, I like the intensity I can get. But as far as uniqueness goes, and really thinking, do I need this particular palette to achieve what's going on here? I would say no, you know, there's nothing incredibly unique happening. Now, what is kind of unique is the choice to put in like this sort of pinky shimmer shade. It's a pinky gold shifting kind of color. Sometimes it looks a bit cooler and pink, sometimes it goes a bit more gold. That's in here, which is a little unusual. You've got a smooth sort of peachy shade right here if you want to keep it warm, but also stay matte and just use the cream. But I wanted to show you that like pinky colored, pinky shifting shade going on. I wish the texture of these shimmers were more consistent. I wish, for example, this one felt like these other two, which are a bit more soft and easy to apply with a brush. So I'm going to pick some up, tap off a little excess because these are fallout prone. Kind of flaky fallout type shades. That used to be an issue for Too Faced, I remember years ago. You'd get like a holiday palette, for example, and there'd be some shades that were just like Flake City, you know, and I felt like maybe they'd been called out on it one time too many, and then they sort of started to get away from that. And now I feel like these little palettes just are all armed with a little glitter trap, you know? Not really glitter trap, but just like fallout trap. It's just a flaky texture that doesn't have to be that way. So there's what that looks like patting that on. I'm getting a very light wash of color. Now see the difference if I put it on with a finger. Oops, bonked my table. Then you can kind of see what that shade's actually made of. You can see the pink, you can see it kind of the shifting, but why should that have to be that way? Why does it have to be like a hard to control, hard to manage shade? And really hard to use anywhere else on the eye where you're not going to be directly like patting it on. So many other spots on the eye, you really need a brush. But that's where that shade's going to live. And I think on the lower lash line, what I'll do is mix a little black and brown, just kind of, you know, bop my pencil brush back and forth between the two and sort of smudge that on the lower lash line. And that is my finished eyeshadow look. So hopefully that gave you a little insight into some of the strengths and the weaknesses of these palettes. I don't think any of them are 100% bad palettes. They all have something good working in them, mainly the mattes. Maybe a shimmer here or there that is easy to work with, but I feel like when you're putting out an 8-pan palette, there's a little more pressure to make every part of that a strong piece of the puzzle, if you know what I mean. And they've shown us they can do it with some other ones in the past, so that's what made me a little disappointed with these. Now, if you're coming away from this thinking, okay, I like the idea of these compact palettes, what brands are putting out smaller palettes these days that I could get my hands on? Well, I think Viseart is very consistently doing things right in their Petite Pro palettes, where they've gotten a little more colorful here and there with some of the directions they're going on those. You can find a great selection of those on Sephora and also on Beautylish. They've done some more compact, like edit size palettes. They really do a nice job of giving you some very complete but edited down size-wise palettes. From the drugstore, think about the Maybelline City Mini palettes. I know there are some new smaller palettes coming out from ColourPop and Wet n Wild that I haven't tried just yet, but that's something I'm definitely going to be looking into. Of course, the e.l.f. bite-size palettes, the Bare Minerals Gen Nude 6-color palettes are fantastic quality. In all of these different brands that I'm mentioning here, I think you're going to notice some real consistency in the quality within those palettes. And I do think we're seeing a trend kind of coming away from the big, massive palettes and brands going a little bit smaller because they are just super manageable, just easier to figure out, but at the same time, there's more pressure on those brands to execute and give us, you know, if it's going to be 8 shades or 6 shades or 4 shades, everything in there really is going to be noticed and worked with, and it all needs to be good quality. So even though Too Faced continues to be the master of cute concepts and cute execution, I just want to see some more consistency on the inside. I'm not saying these are all terrible, but they're not things that I can sit here and say, oh, I love them so much. So sorry if this is kind of a downer of a review, but you know I'm going to give it to you honestly every single time. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this info, and I will see you again soon. Bye.